Well, guys, I got to tell you, I'm excited to get to do this with you. We're in this book. You see that book says Core at the top, and it's Better Man and Unleashing a Better Manhood. But basically, we're going to go on an 11-week journey through what it means to be a man. And that's in our culture today. Nobody knows what a man is. How do you define that? How do we talk about it? What is toxic masculinity? What is masculinity? And so we get to get a clear picture of what is a man over the next 11 weeks. We get to figure out what a working definition of that for us. And this just doesn't happen anymore. There's not a lot of this going on. Now, I was handing around a sign-in sheet, and it had, let me grab that back book for you. This is men's fraternity. This is what this is based off of. And so this was a 24-week sessions from the 90s that swept through the country. I went through it multiple times. Here's what's crazy. This was in Friendship's library when I was cleaning out my side office this week, which means we already had the content at this church that if we would have used, it doesn't even look like it's been touched. Maybe they watched it once. But here's the thing. If this was just content, the book has fill in the blanks, and all the answers are in the back of the book. You can go fill them out tonight, and you're done. But I will tell you time and again, I've gone through this multiple times over 20 years, and I have seen guys try to do this with just the content alone, and they fail every time. It's the brotherhood that's formed when we kind of do this together, when you realize you're not alone in this. We're on this journey together. So as good as the content is, you need that being able to be in this group together. So we're going to start on page 6. There's fill in the blanks and kind of go from that. So I will try to stay on track to get you the fill in the blanks. If I miss one, I shouldn't. It'll be on the screen, but if I don't, it's in the back of your book. But as we get started, it calls it starting line perspectives and looking at manhood today. So if we're all up here at the starting line and we're on this journey together, you look around, you find out we have a lot in common, and so that's going to be the first perspective. When you look around your room. You got people, maybe you've got the same hobbies, whether that's hunting and fishing, maybe it's cars and trucks, maybe it's the job you're in, life stage you're in. You're a grandparent, or you're a parent, or you're single, or anywhere in between. We can all find some things that are in common, and we have the same issues in common. We have the same struggles as we go through this. And the other thing that we find out about us is that we all want to be better men. And so there's a list of different ways that could be. But when you think about being better men, I remember the guy name was Farrar. Steve Farrar wrote a book, Point Man. Don't know if anybody's ever read it, but he tells a story in there of an Army recruiter, a Navy recruiter, and a Marine recruiter that came to a high school. They had 200 boys, senior boys, that were going to go listen to them give a talk. 15 minutes each is what they were told they had. And then afterwards, they could go to the cafeteria and talk to the interested boys. Well, the Army guy gets up, and he got so excited. He was supposed to take 15 minutes. He took over 20. He was so excited. So the Navy man, not to be outdone, he went over 20 minutes. And then it came time for the Marine recruiter, and he had 2 minutes left. And Farrar tells the story that the Marine went up there, and he got up there with 2 minutes to go, and he stood there. And for the first minute, he just stood in stone silence and surveyed the crowd. And he basically, they knew what he was doing. He was sizing them all up. And then with 1 minute to go, he says, men, I only see about 2 or 3 of you that would make it in the Marines. I want to see those 3 men in the cafeteria after we dismiss. And that was all he said. You can imagine he was mobbed by the young men that wanted to sign up for that. And so there's this idea, we want to be better. We want to be called up to something better. I don't want to settle. I don't want to just be an okay dad, an okay husband, okay at what I do at work. I want to be able to do what I do well. And so we want to be better. So maybe some of you, when you look at that list here, some of you feel good about where you're at, but you want to keep growing. Okay? You realize that this is a journey, and you haven't arrived. So maybe that's you today. So you share that in common with some of these. But some of us, maybe you've got some questions like, what do I need to know that I don't? You know, you're stepping into marriage right now, or maybe it's children, and you're like, what are my top priorities? I want to be intentional about my time. How do I live without regrets? Others, maybe you're looking for practical help. Marriage, kids, spiritual life. Take your pick. But if we're honest, some of us, maybe you're struggling and you need a new direction. And we've all been there. I just want you to know you're not alone if you're struggling with direction. We've all been there at some point, and your failures don't have to define you. And so as we go through this, we're going to take a step back and get kind of a clear picture of what it means to be a man as we get started in this, because we're coming from so many different perspectives. And so we jump to the next page, page 7, where it talks about how are men doing today. And I'll tell you right now, there's a lot of statistics today. In this session, there's a lot of like bad news of like what the state of manhood today. We're not here to just grumble and complain and talk about the problems. We're here to find solutions, and we're going to get clear definitions through this. We're also going to break off into small groups, and we're not going to gather around and cry on each other's shoulder and sing Kumbaya. We're men. We're going to talk about these things, and we're going to get honest with each other. But some of us are worried about, what are you expecting from me? I'm just saying we're going to press in, get honest with each other. I mean, it's okay to shed a tear every once in a while, but that's not the goal. It's like the group that cries the most wins or something like that. And so it's funny because especially if I'm like hanging out with my kids, there's a moment where I'll tend to like leak from my eyes is the way I say it now. And some people get mad at me because I don't call it crying. But like I saw my son raise his hands in worship today, and it got me. And I knew I got to get up and preach. And if I let that go too long, I'll get up there and I'll be a mess. And I'll just cry the whole time. And the ladies in this church go, oh, honey, you cry all you want. Nobody minds. Oh, I mind and you mind. Like, you don't want me up there crying every week. I had a friend. He was awesome. But every time he taught the Bible, he cried. I mean, about the dumbest stuff sometimes. I'm like, I don't want to be that guy. So, like, I try to lock that in and keep that. But they don't get that as a man, there's certain things you try to portray. But also, it's like, I just want to be in control of my emotions. I don't want to be that. And so I get that there's a balance here. We're not here to just all cry and blubber around, even though sometimes you need to do that. I've been there. But anyway, as we get into this, how are men doing today? We're going to see some statistics through this, but some good news first. Some men have found a manhood that works. And a manhood that truly works is life-giving. That's the next one of those. So when you think about that, you think about the circles of your life. There are guys in your life. Let's say you're at hunting camp or you're at work at a team meeting at work, and this one guy comes in, and it's the guy that everybody's like glad to see. The energy in the room goes up, right? They will step up. They'll do whatever needs to be done on the job. They don't have to be told. They're like life-giving. You're glad they're there. You know they're interested in you, and they're not just takers. They're givers. But we also know those other guys. They show up. Energy comes down. You know they're only around you when they need something. They're takers. This kind of manhood is life-giving. And when you see that kind of manhood, what you see here, it says, is people are encouraged by it. You know, women and wives feel safe and valued around it. You know, that's the thing about masculinity. If it's done correctly, they feel safe. Families thrive with it. It's the picture of that husband and wife, especially the dad, when he is a stable, centering force in the family. It's like the rest of the family kind of revolves around that, is that there's stability in that. And then they thrive. Sons are drawn to it, it says. You know, that's the sons that look at their dad and say, that's my dad. They're proud to call out that that's their dad. They're drawn to that kind of manhood, the kind that works. Daughters delight in it. You know, I've got daughters, and I want them to be raised in such a way they see manhood. So when they get into relationships, they're looking for men that model this kind of manhood. The last thing I want to do is be the dad that creates daddy issues for my daughters. So when they go out in the world and the first guy that says you're pretty or gives them any attention, they run to them because they've got daddy issues, because they didn't understand what a real man looks like for me. To feel secure and delight in that, they need that from someone else. You know, there's whole groups of men that prey on girls with daddy issues. Like, so if you've got daughters, you know, this is important as well. Even though we talk a lot about sons, it matters for us with daughters. And finally, the workplace and community benefit because of it. So that's some more things that we see out of manhood that truly works. And then even here, life-giving is the word that the Bible used to describe Jesus. And that's actually found in 1 Corinthians 15:45. Notice this is going to be a key part of this definition of manhood as we get to that in week 5. It says, the first man became a living being, that being Adam, the first man Adam, and the last Adam became a life-giving spirit, that being Jesus. The first Adam is the one that, because of sin, brought the curse on us. The last Adam, Jesus, he reversed our sin curse. And how do you do that? 1 Peter tells us by he gave his life to us. his death brought us life. So that's life-giving. That's what we want to be about. We want to be givers and not takers in our relationships. And so as we're working through this, I've gotten to see men move forward in their manhood journey through this. I've gotten to see guys take that initiative in their life and watch their families thrive as a result of it. And so that's what we want to see. But the power of that comes from Jesus. He's the one that gives us life. And one way it was described to me is like a car without gas. We can do this life without Jesus. And when it's downhill, we can coast pretty far, right? I was dropping my kids off at school one day, and I realized I had not checked the gas. I forget what happened. Never happens to me, but I ran out of gas. But I'm at the top of a hill. It's a mile down to the school, and there's cars in front of me, and I killed the truck with just enough gas that I cranked it and popped it, and I got started down the hill as other cars were going, and I rode that brake for the next 5 minutes, just slowly but surely, no power steering, anything in the truck. And I coasted in, and I pulled in, and I walked in and got my kids because I had to drive back up the hill. You know what? Without gas, it's not going back uphill. I can coast. I can't take the hills. When you look at life, you can coast till you hit the hills, but life is more uphill than it is coasting. And that's why we need Jesus to give us that life. And so we're going to get into that a lot in this. And I promise that what we find is things that point us to a better life. So the life-giving nature that makes us a better man, when we're in this, it works. But then you jump into the next part, and some men, though, they're in a manhood fog. Last Wednesday, it was foggy. You couldn't see 10 feet in front of you on Hurricane Road. And when things are foggy, vision isn't clear. And we're talking about manhood. What is that picture of manhood? When we don't have a clear picture, it's foggy. And you think back, you don't have to look very far to see how times have changed in our culture. You see that on that list. Times have changed, leaving men conflicted and confused. There was a time it was a lot easier to figure out what a man was. You go back a few generations, and men primarily worked on their farm, and they worked at home. So either they worked at their farm, or they worked at a shop in their house, or they worked in town, but it wasn't far away. And so boys grew up seeing their dads doing their job. They saw their dads at their best. The plow breaks, they saw them problem solve. They saw them fix it. They saw them overcome difficulties. They got to see their dad at their best. Then the Industrial Revolution comes along. Men started going off into factories. Well, now you've got these men going off to factories. The boys go into schooling, primarily led by women. Nothing against women, not rocking that. But at the same time, they don't get to see dad at their best anymore. When are you going to see dad do problem solving, overcome, the problems that he faces? How does he deal with anger? All those things. You don't get to see it anymore. Dad's gone. You're just learning at school. And you learn at school, you don't get to be a boy, Girls can emotionally kill each other with bullying tactics. But we go out and we settle it with one punch in the yard, and guess what? School suspension for us. The girls, they're over there causing way more damage, and we've already worked it out. But that's the way schooling works. Then you take the 20th century. Whole generations of men going off to war. You had World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, the Gulf Wars. Men were coming home. Whole generations of fathers coming home, emotionally cut off from their children. The PTSD and the things they faced caused them to pull back. And then you take this new culture. There are people that would say anything masculine is toxic. Not just toxic masculinity, they'd say all of it. So men walk on eggshells wanting to talk about manhood. And so then you take boys growing up in this, how do we help them see a vision for manhood when that's what our culture has done? So it's very confusing and it's hard to figure it out. So we've got to turn from the answers of the past because that's not working anymore. But what does the answers in the present look like? Because what you see as you look through it, we need to recognize that men in a manhood fog struggle. They struggle. When you think about struggling here, it gives us a couple of ways that they struggle as a result of not having a clearly defined manhood. We don't have that vision because it's foggy. This is what happens when they struggle. They settle for less in life, but they don't know it's less. They just settle into a routine. And there was this psychiatrist, this is from the 1950s, his name was Rollo May, and he wrote about what he saw in the life of men. And some things have changed since then, but I want to read to you what he had to say about men all the way back in the 50s. He said, the clearest picture of an empty life is a suburban man who gets up at the same hour every weekday morning, He takes the same train to work in the city. He performs the same task at the office. He lunches at the same places, leaves the same tip for the waitress, comes home on the same train each night, spends a 2-week vacation at the shore each summer, which he does not enjoy. He goes to church but does not know why he goes. He moves through a routine, mechanical existence year after year after year until he retires at age 65 and very soon after dies of heart failure, possibly brought on by the repressed anger, although I have always had the suspicion he died of boredom. Now, we don't get on a train and go somewhere, but you look at life, it's like a treadmill. That's what he's describing. Day in, day out, you get on that treadmill and you go. And now things have changed. People don't tend to stay at the same job as much anymore, for instance, but you know those guys, they're jumping from job to job to job. Oh, this is the one. This is the one that's going to make me happy. Or, hey, you know what? I'm starting up this new business, and if I just sell my soul to this for the next year, I'm going to cash in life. You know, we see that. Other guys, you know, you think about treadmills there, the next new vacation, the next new toy, the next sexual exploit, the next new experience. It's still just a treadmill. And we look up one day and go, is this it? Do we settle for less? And that's what we don't want to do. We don't want to settle for less. And that's what happens when we don't have a clear picture. So men in a manhood fog, they struggle. They create problems, lots of them. When you start looking at society and the number of crimes committed by men compared to women, it becomes pretty evident where we cause a lot of those issues. 90% of all crimes committed by men. 95% of all burglaries committed by men. 98% of all sexual assaults committed by men. 94% of drunk drivers are men. So if you don't have a vision, you get into trouble. And we're going to see that in just a second. But it tells us that third one, you know, we guess at our masculinity and we hope it works. We just guess at it. Like, maybe this is what a man is, you know. Maybe we think based on what we've seen on TV or whatever it is. But I feel this so much because when I was 9 years old, my dad left us, and he died when I was still in high school. And so growing up, I didn't have anybody to tell me. You know, I had to guess a lot about what is manhood. And I've shared some of these stories in the past, but like I didn't know how to tie a tie. I didn't know how to ask a girl out, how to lead in the dance. My dad was a mechanic in the Air Force in Vietnam. He never taught me how to change the oil in a vehicle or drive a stick shift. None of those things. And I was angry. I remember just growing up going, why, you know, how am I supposed to know these things? I was an angry kid. If you knew me back then, I was a hothead. I thought it was, they said the Davis temper, that's what I had, Gage, and I just used that as an excuse. But I realized there was something far deeper there. I was having to guess at everything, and I hated it. There was another pastor that mentioned this happened to him. His dad died when he was younger, but he had an older brother. So he had somebody to look at, to say, is this success? And is this a man? And his brother was actually quite successful, went off to college, and he started getting jobs at places like Dell and Cisco Systems and all these computer companies over the last 20 years. And he just kept moving up and up in the world. And this pastor said, but what he didn't realize was while his brother was moving up in the world, he was working his way down to the bottom of a bottle. And he was drinking every day just to get through the day. And he was called into a hospital bed to his brother's side when he was 42 years old. And he said, but if you didn't know him, you'd have thought he was 72. His body had given out, and he died. Now, I've seen men in the confusion play out. Maybe not as dramatic as that, someone drinking themselves to death at 42. But here's what happens. When we don't have a picture, we just try to make it up as we go. We cause problems. We can get into lots of trouble as a result. Maybe you feel like that's where you're at. You're in the fog. The good news is we don't have to stay there. There's a quote on the next page, page 8. I'm not going to get into it tonight, but basically this anthropologist says you need to find healthy roles for your men, because if you don't, there's problems. And you can read more about that, but there's actually 3 P's to that. Every man needs a purpose, a plan, and a pursuit, or you get problems. Do you have those things in your life? You know, that's what we're trying to get, is a purpose and a plan. We get a game plan for life at this. I like to win. But if we play a game and I don't know the rules and I don't know how to win, I get frustrated real quick. And a lot of us, that's what life is. So we're going to figure out what is that game plan for winning. But I wanted to jump ahead and get into these challenges that we face with our time that we have left. The 4 challenges that men face going forward, you'll see it. The first one is the loss of a common manhood vision. The loss of a manhood vision. There's a lot of ideas of what a man looks like, but we don't have a shared vision. You know, what is a man? Like, who told you you were a man? Who's the first one to say you're a man? Or when did you know you were a man? Was it when you were 18? Or was it when your bank account got something far, when you got married? And who is a man? Like, what was our definition of a man? I heard somebody put it pretty good for multi-general. Is it John Wayne, Bruce Wayne, or Little Wayne? But like, do you have a picture of what is a man? Okay, there's the John Wayne guy all the way to Lil Wayne. You got to decide what is a man in this. And so we're trying to figure this common manhood vision out, because without vision, we live in a no man's land. We have to make it up, kind of guessing at it. And I remember there was this article in Wired magazine about the movies. You see, I was an 80s kid, and I grew up watching Transformers. And they were talking about how the movie started to come out. You know, they made Transformers movies. One just came back out on like Amazon or whatever. I still watch them if I can with the kids, but it's Michael Bay as the director. Michael Bay makes things go boom. You know, he's looking for the blockbuster movie, everything blows up. But they were shocked when they started coming out with these Transformer movies, because the actors started calling in and they were terrified they were going to mess up the story. They wanted to make sure they had the essence of the story just right so they didn't mess up this Transformer movie. And Michael Bay's like, what are you talking about? Like, it's just a big robots, fighting each other. Why does this matter so much? And so Wired magazine started to dig into it, and it turns out that the biggest one they were scared of messing up was the leader of the Transformers. Do y'all know who that is? Who knows? Optimus Prime. That's right. They did not want to mess him up. That was a noble character to them, and they wanted to follow it. So here's what it said. This guy, who's a 30-year-old National Guardsman, said these words in the article. I latched onto Optimus Prime as a kid. You see, my dad passed away, and I didn't really have anyone around, and he was there for me every day. And so that Wired magazine comes on and finally dove into it a little bit and said, Optimus Prime practically parented the latchkey kids of the mid-'80s. He was our all-father when flesh and blood models weren't around. You hear that? That's a group of men saying, I need a vision, and I'll settle for a toy robot. I just need somebody to look up to. That's what we're looking for. We need to what is that? What is that picture that we're trying to portray to others? What is that for us? That's what we're trying to figure out, because we want that vision. Because without it, it says right here, without vision, we're left to make it up for ourselves. Proverbs 29:18, where there is no vision, the men run wild. Notice it says people, but with men without vision, we run wild. And so it's important that we understand these things in it. Now, the next part of this is the rise of a weightless manhood. When you think about a weightless manhood, it gives us a picture of that. It is created with the emotionally and or physically absent dad. Okay, so maybe your dad wasn't there. Or maybe he came home, but he still wasn't there. Emotionally gone, okay? Whichever one that is, when you have a dad in your life, it provides that weight. And here's what it looks like. Emotional stability. It says love and affirmation. Now, your moms naturally nurture. They naturally move that way. But dads, that's got to be intentional. You know, if you leave that all to the girls and they leave that all to the wives, we're missing out, because one of the biggest things that you see in our world are men that are wearing themselves out for the approval of a dad who's completely absent. He may already be dead, or he's never even noticed, but they're still trying to win that affirmation. Make sure it's not our kids like that. Maybe you're the one on that rat race, though. You've been trying to prove to a dad that's not even paying attention. When you have a dad that pays attention, you get that stability. You get those moral convictions and practical skills in there as well. And so there's a part of this when you think about weightless versus not weightless. The way they described it in this series is there was a guy named Michael Plant. Michael Plant bought and created a $650,000 boat. It was sleek. It was called the Coyote. He wanted to sail around the world on it. So he spent $65,000, and this is back in 1992, which, I don't know, that's worth what, $20 million now? I mean, it feels like that's just a lot of money back then when I was growing up. But he wanted to sail around the world, and he set off in October of 92 from New York. And about 30 days later, a Greek tanker found his boat completely upside, capsized. There was a 60-foot mast on this thing, and it was pointed straight down, completely intact. But it was missing something. On the bottom of the boat, it's called the keel, there was supposed to be an 8,600-pound bulb. It's called the bulb keel. And that bulb was what held that boat in the cross currents and with the cross winds and everything else. That was to what give it stability, but it was missing. It was sheared off. They don't know if a whale hit it, rock hit it, malfunction, whatever. But without it, that craft was completely upside down. And we don't have that weight in our life to know what a man is. It's just like that. When cross currents in our culture hit us, it flips us upside down. And that's why he calls it a weightless manhood. We don't have that dad to provide that weighting in our life. So we've got to find a way to put that back in us. So you've got an epidemic here. You see this in the middle of page 9. In 1960, only 5% of boys in America were fatherless. Today, it's 41%. And how many of those of the 60% that are left are actually present and not emotionally absent? Now, we've talked a lot about boys. We've talked a lot about sons. And maybe you're saying, Jason, I don't have any boys. All I got is daughters, or I don't have kids yet. Like, what's this got to do with me? That's where this comes in, because I remember what it was like growing up without a dad. And I didn't know how to shake a hand. And at our church, they did the whole awkward shake a hand next to you where you shake everybody's hand. Well, I was left-handed. This is what I did. I walked up and started doing this. Some men set me straight real quick. Hey, you shake with your right hand. Web to web. Squeeze. And then that was one man in the church. And then I would go around and I'd shake hands like this. And somebody stopped me and said, son, when you don't look me in the eyes like that and you don't give me eye contact, you look shifty. I can't trust you. And I learned to look men in the eye and give them a good handshake because I had father figures. You may not have your own kids, but everybody around us is looking. Statistically, we need to be those father figures. They need a vision in our church. There's some young boys in this church that have no father figures around them except who we are at church. And that's why we have to live this out. So that's why it's so important that we get this. But I remember being scolded by one of the dudes. Like, he just got on to me about how to shake a hand and stuff. But now when a young man shakes my hand and looks me in the eye, that impresses me more than anything else they can do. Because somebody has invested in them. They didn't get that by accident. They didn't find that on YouTube. They're not going to find that kind of answer. There's somebody that invested in them. So one more thing that we face is C right here, a radically changed and rapidly changing social landscape. Look at some of these statistics from the last 50 years. We're almost done, guys. This is the longest session in all of it. It's about 45 minutes total, so I'm trying to keep us on track. But look at these stats. It says men and women's roles have increasingly merged. The definition of marriage has changed for the first time in over 4,000 years. Now, it can mean a lot of different things. Some 44% of millennials now consider marriage obsolete. If you're wondering what a millennial is, or if you're a millennial, mid-20s, early 40s, that's the millennials. Now, in Mississippi, that can change depending on what pocket of the South you lived in, but if you remember 9/11, you're probably in the millennial stage, where if you don't, you're in Gen Z. That's those high schoolers that we saw today at church. And there's differences, but look at that. That generation sees marriage as basically almost half say that marriage is obsolete. Cohabitation has exploded. For the first time, it says in American history, there's more unmarried adults than married adults. There's 61% of children are born to mothers under 30 are born outside of marriage. There's multiple gender categories. In 14 states this year, there will be a third option on gender on the driver's license. That's how dramatically it's changed. Could you imagine trying to describe this to some of our granddads? It's not just boys and girls anymore. There's this, there's that, all this changed, all that. It's just all of this has changed. Now, some things have changed, and it's bad for guys but good for girls. Women now outnumber men in college. They're earning more advanced degrees, it says. They're enrolling in law and medical schools by a majority. It says that New York Times said men are being left behind in the dust at college. So there's some information here. Single women are buying homes faster than single men. Depression rates tenfold among men since 1960. Women shoulder most of the responsibility for the health and vitality of the Christian faith in the United States. There's a lot of churches. The only people active in it are the women. And the men aren't drawn to it outside of the church. And inside the church, it's like, why don't the women, let the men do it? No, the men didn't step up. There's a reason women run most churches is because the men were passive and didn't step up. And so I'm thankful to be at a church where I have men that don't let that happen. Like they step up and they say, I will help. I'll be a part of this. But that is a major part. A lot of people look at church, think of it as a feminine thing to do instead of understanding what it means to follow Jesus as your king. So clearly women are excelling in today's modern world while men have stalled. That's your next couple of fill in the blanks. So when we get into this section, that's where we are. And part of the reason we're here is because there are certain lies men believe about themselves, and that's part D. And that's what we want to look at for a few minutes, is just some of these lies that we believe about ourselves. You'll see that on page 11. The first one is, I should know what to do. You think, I should know how to take care of my finances. I should know how to take care of my wife. I should know how to do these things because I'm a man. And we believe that lie. I was coming back, and some of you know this story because I've shared that conversation with you, but again, my dad never taught me how to drive a stick shift. Well, that didn't matter in the suburbs. Nobody cared. We all drove around our little vehicles, and if it iced over, we just stayed home, that kind of thing. Everybody here's got a 4x4. Everybody knows what they're doing. But when I moved back, I was looking at a truck that was built in the 60s, and it was more than likely a manual transmission. And I said, yeah, I'm a little worried about that because I can't drive a stick. And I would watch people's response to that. And it was priceless. Some guys would go, are you serious? You can't drive a stick? How can you not know? Because are we born at birth to know how to drive a stick? I didn't have a dad to teach me. I learned how to take computers apart because that's what I learned. But for a long time, I was ashamed of that. Now I do it as a social experiment. I'm like, I can't drive a stick. I just see what guys say, like, how can you not drive a stick? But we think, I should know that. And for a long time, I was ashamed. I was frustrated. But there's other things in our life. I should have known better how to handle my finances. I should have known how to handle raising kids or whatever it is. And so maybe you believe into that line that we should just know these things. It's just not true. So with that, we look at the next one. I'm the only one who struggles with this. I'm the only one that really struggles with some of these things. You think nobody else is struggling with pornography. Nobody else is struggling with anger, feelings of insecurity, all these things. We just think, I'm the only one, so I've got to figure this out. And I'm telling you, you can try and take this and figure it out on your own, but I've watched guys try and fail for 20 years. We need others to go, you know what? I've been there. I've done exactly what you're going through. I failed. I messed up. And here's what I learned. We need to be able to build each other up in those moments. And here's a big one. Number 3, it's too late to do anything about this. You know what? My relationship's over. It's too late. I'll never have a good relationship with my kids. It's too late. I can't make a career change. It's too late. When we buy into that lie, we miss out on some of the things that God wants to do in our lives. I have seen men decide to say, it's not too late. I'm going to repair that relationship with my kids. I'm going to repair that relationship, financially or whatever it is. I'm going to make a career change. And I've watched men step up and watch their lives thrive. Now, they didn't always succeed in the eyes of the world, but you know what? They knew they gave it a shot. You want to be able to look at your kids one day and say, I gave it everything I could to make it work with your mom. But so many times we're taught in our culture, just give up. These are the moments where you might be thinking it's too late, and it's not too late to at least give it a shot and do what God's called you to. So we got a few more. I can do this, and no one will ever know. I'll deal with these little problems. It's not really a problem for me, so I don't really need to let anybody know. And if I tell you the truth about myself, you'll reject me. That's the big one for a lot of us. If you knew me, you really knew me, you wouldn't accept me. I'll just tell you right now, in these groups, if you get honest and let's say you're sharing a problem with something, let's say you go, you know what, I'm addicted to pornography. Your group is not going to go, what's pornography? Your group's not going to stand up and go, I've never dealt with pornography. I've never dealt with lust. How dare you? Like, what kind of guy deals with that? They're going to go, you know what, I've been there. And they need you to be honest enough so they can walk alongside it with you. I've watched some things happen at our church this past year, and it's guys that didn't want to tell me they were struggling, and I missed opportunities to just invest in them. I'm not going to judge them. I just want to know so I can walk alongside you so you know you're not alone. That's what this journey is about. So I want to give you a second to take an act of courage. Take a look at that list of 5 lies. It's 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm so bad at math. I want to give you a chance. Circle one you've been telling yourself is true, or circle the one you struggle with the most. I'm just going to invite you to go ahead and do that. Take about 10 seconds, look them over. Which one is the biggest struggle that you deal with? So as we finish out, here's a couple of things that we've got to ask. The one question is, can we define manhood that will work for us in the modern world? What is it? It's not if it's not about our bank account, if it's not about the size of our muscles, if it's not how deep our voice is, what is it? And the answer is yes, we can find that. And we're going to get to do that over the next couple of weeks. We get to the definition on week 5. And I'll talk about that in a second, but some are like, just give it to me now. We like to run with a plan, but we need to set some more groundwork. We need to till some soil. There's some more parts we need to unpack. They're not slow playing it to get more money out of us. It's one book, and all they're getting out of it is the printing cost. You got to think about where this is going out in our country. There's whole groups of men right now that have never been in a church that are checking this out because somebody invited them, and they're gonna. And you notice this was not Bible heavy tonight. We're not just digging into the Bible the whole time. We're getting a few statistics. We're reading a few verses, but that is very intentional because you learn to build trust in this, so that when we do talk about the ultimate man is Jesus. They've learned to trust you enough to hear it, okay? So that's what's cool about this. And so we're going to get there. There's a reason behind it. So there's 5 promises they make on this better man journey. And the first one is you'll increase your manhood understanding and make some significant personal discoveries. Every time I go through men's fraternity, I find new things out. I get reminded of things I forgot from the first time I did it. My wife, I've gone through men's fraternity at least 6 times. There's other groups of it, like break-offs and other things. I've gone through those dozens of times, it feels like. And people would go, Amy, why are you letting Jason do this? And it just bothers me when they'd say, why are you letting Jason do this? Because I'm a man. But no, she knows, and I know I'm going to do what I want to do, because that's what men do, right? No, she would just respond graciously to them and say, every time Jason goes through men's fraternity, he's a better husband. And it's true. Because I make new discoveries every time. I'm in a different life stage every time I go through this. So I'm going to find out some things about me through this, but you're going to find some things out as well. Number 2 on the promise is you'll receive helpful insight and support from your table leader. Now, Stephen McBrayer, Nate Gore, and myself will be your table leaders in this group. And we've got some for the Wednesday night group. But you're supposed to start with a group of 5, go through this training, and come out with 5 table leaders. And launched this to the church. I didn't wait that long. I went ahead and launched it big. And I talked to better men, the company and stuff, because it's not rocket science. You can look one page over, page 13, there's your questions. There's 3 questions. The table leader is going to go, how do you think men are doing today? What's your greatest concerns as a man in this modern world? And encourage everybody in the group to share and not let anybody dominate and not just shoot the breeze and not get to the actual questions. That's what it takes. It's not rocket science. But you'll find out by week 3, you're going to go, I could read the questions. And I truly believe this, and some of you won't believe this yet, but I believe every man in this room could be a table leader in the fall if that was the need in our community and you had a group of 5 guys that needed this. And I believe every one of you could be a table leader, but there's some men in our church that don't feel like they could be for whatever reason. That's what these 11 weeks are for. There's a bigger picture, what you can be. So, you're going to receive that help. You will also make new friends. You are getting put with groups of people, and you don't know everybody, and that is intentional. If you just hang out with the people that you know, it's kind of hard to grow in that. But it is kind of scary for some to go out of that box. But when you realize that you've got more in common than you ever realized, my friend Shane from Tennessee, this is how we got to know each other, was men's fraternity. We went to a golf tournament. We kind of hung out after that. But his brother was wanting to do this men's fraternity. I had gone through it before. I went through it. We went through it 2 whole times because he knew other men that needed this. And I had the privilege of seeing Shane and his wife come to know Christ and baptize them. And it took about 6 years of going through some of this and walking through him. But I have seen my best friend come through this. But we weren't best friends when we started. We thought we had nothing in common. And it turns out there's a lot in common now, especially with Christ. So just so you know, if you'll open yourself up to it, you can make some new friends. And these are men that will have the same language as you, the same inside jokes, because we go through this together, and that helps through this. When I watched the 5 guys that did the video series, the reason I decided to do it live is because the 2 of the guys didn't fit our culture. The other 3, 2 of them clearly, they're great speakers. And they hired them because they're great speakers, and they had clearly never gone through men's fraternity because they were talking about theory. But the one guy, even when he talked, I could tell he'd gone through men's fraternity because the language changes and his illustrations of how he has seen men. But he was talking more to that suburban mindset, and he's talking about things that honestly is a waste of time for us when we need to just get down into what it means to be a man here, okay? And so that's why I went ahead and bit the bullet, and I'm going to teach it live. I promise I'm not wanting to do it as much as I know it's important. I actually talked to the guy that I was going to show his videos, and it says, you should teach live, if at all possible. So that's why I'm investing this in you, and I'm going to sleep like the dead tonight, okay? Because when I speak, I get really tired afterwards every time, especially on stuff like this. So the final two promises out of this is you will have the opportunity to upgrade your manhood using a weekly Better Man question. The first one of those will be in session 2, which is in 2 weeks. Remember, Super Bowl is coming up, and then we'll jump back into it. You'll use those answers at the end to build and create your own Better Man plan. So by the end of this, you'll have all these questions that you've answered to help you build a game plan. And everybody's will be different as a result of that. But you'll also receive a clear definition of manhood. That's that 5th promise. It's going to be presented in session 5, and then it's spelled out from session 6 to 10. And so in just a minute, we're going to go into our small groups and kind of talk through some of this and process this. It's not super deep as you're getting going on this. It's just kind of where you're at and what are some things that excite you about this. But it gives us a picture of manhood. That's what this 11 weeks is going to do. And, I hope you'll stay with me. The chances of all 45 men going through it are slim. But let's break that mold, okay? Every time there's guys, all of a sudden, there's easy to make excuses. It rained, it's cold. I'm just glad you made it tonight because this is the hardest night to make it to. And so then as we go through this, now you got guys looking forward to seeing you and you're looking forward to seeing them, and it builds that accountability. I started going to jiu-jitsu 9 years ago, and I couldn't do the night classes because my wife says dinner matters to her. So they started a 6 a.m. class, and I'm like, I'm without excuse because I got nothing better to do at 6 a.m. than go and try to strangle each other. So I show up to class the first time, and this was 5 years ago. This year, in May, they're celebrating a 5-year thing and want me to come up for it. But I remember standing in the class, and there were 5 of us. And this young coach that's a black belt, and he's awesome, but he says, look, we have to have 5 guys on average to keep this class going or we're going to close it down. And there were 5 of us. So we looked around like instant accountability, right? I need to be here so that we all get out of this. You need to be here for the rest of your team, okay, so that we all get something out of this. Because, again, anybody can just go over the curriculum. When at all possible, don't have to watch it online. Try to do it in person because it matters. So we don't need to be perfect men. We just need to be better men. That's what we're trying to get to, okay? So let's do that together.